For me, Arcadia is one of the great plays of my theater-going life. And I suppose my first question to you is, where did the play start in your adventure?
It started with the notion that it would be interesting to have a room in which things happened at widely separated intervals and
in time.
In time. I just started with the thought that there was a room and it didn't change much, if at all, and people in the 20th century are on a quest to find out something which happened in this room in the 19th century. Very simple, basic idea, but plays never turn out to be what you think they're going to be when you start them. At least they shouldn't.
There's a quality about the play. It feels both determined, because it's made, and yet how you got there is a series of totally arbitrary. It feels like you were surprised.
Well, I was. I had a distinct memory of writing the play up to the point where the 20th century academic arrives at this house with his briefcase. And I have a distinct memory of having to decide at that moment whether the letters which were written in the 19th century were in the house or in his briefcase. I hadn't got as far as working out how this was going to work, and I pretty soon realized they better be in his briefcase. So he brings them to the house and he brings them out and so on. I've come to believe that it's really quite a good thing not to know too much about where it's all going. It became an odd process where I was just following my nerve ends and pulling in stuff which I was already interested in, and I was getting stuff out of books which I'd had on my bookshelves for 20 or 30 years.
I love the satire of the biographer and the issue which the play is addressing, the sort of need for the culture for a story that explains everything. Can you talk to that sort of narrative need? It comes up a lot.
Well, I think what you're talking about partly is the idea that we think we can disinter the past and interpret it accurately, but as a matter of fact, a lot of it is very speculative, and we receive a lot of history which we take to be absolute, and we probably ought to be more skeptical about the stories we're being told. And obviously with Arcadia, part of the fun is the fact that you can be a witness not only to the history being made, but to the history being misinterpreted.
And it's a terrible frustration of the biographer. You have to play your unconscious, intuitive hunches and hope that you're going to find evidence. And the danger is that you'll either distort the evidence to prove your point, or make some wild, mad assumption.
The problem is always in two places. The problem is the next line, and the problem is also the next valley or the hidden ground and so on. And I have a lot of faith in the notion that one ought to make the next line the problem, the next moment, and let the thing aggregate in a way that feels honest. If you actually start by slicing and dicing what you think you're going to write and making it very logical, and you know where you're going, and you know where the corners are, and you've got this road map, I think that the result would be actually quite brittle, and because unconsciously you're forcing people to say and do things so that they stick with your map.
I'm afraid I have a couple of novels in the drawer that are absolutely victims of that problem.
Oh, really? Well, yeah. When you're as old as I am, you'll see that it's actually the smart thing is not to worry about it and just do what feels right in the next moment. And if it feels right, probably things work out better anyway, even in a structural sense. And this is not a newly minted phrase, but I'm not ashamed to use it for the 50th time. When things do work out, it's a good thing if you feel lucky rather than clever. Because if you feel clever, it's probably been arranged here and there. Whereas if you feel lucky, it just sort of falls onto the paper.
Some plays, like some books, have a karma that somehow it just works, or you can
Yes.
have written better in another play, but it somehow doesn't fall.
Yes.
It is chance.
It's a really good karma. It's a really good luck play. As a matter of fact, the last piece of the puzzle is the last line of the play. I mean, it really does fall out right, to the point where there's nothing extra to say, and you're not a line short either. Something happens in the last 10 seconds, the woman says, I was looking for that, and it's like the puzzle being finished, and
Yes, but
we dance and go home.
One of the things, the news that the play gave to me, which I never knew, I didn't understand about, was the English landscape. And the shift from Enlightenment concept of nature to a romantic one, and the ideas that contains.
Yes.
Has that always been a fascination of yours, the English landscape as such?
You know, I came to England when I was 8 years old. It was a completely new place. And we, as it happened, lived in Derbyshire, which is where Arcadia is set.
I didn't know that. Oh, fascinating.
Yeah, my first family home was in Derbyshire, and furthermore, it was a few minutes away from Chatsworth, the seat of the Dukes of Devonshire, which is one of the classic stately homes of England. But we used to go and picnic in the park of the house. And by the time I was 10 or 11, I thought this was England, and I loved every blade of grass. It just seemed, and my mother responded the same way. In point of fact, it was a careful artifice brought about by artists called landscape gardeners, employed by rich people who owned lots of land. And their ideas and their pictorial ideas came out of the imagination of preceding generations of painters who were being inspired by the literature of classical antiquity.
It's really not art imitating life, but life imitating, that our natural landscape is, again, the idea of imposing an order.
Yes.
And an idea of
Yes.
a culturally specific idea of order.
Yes.
Neoclassic as opposed to romantic.
Yes.
Wildness as opposed to sort of symmetry, God symmetry.
Of course, the way the landscape evolves is in harmony with the way society evolves.
Absolutely.
So the social and political life of the land is reflected in every kind of taste and aesthetic.
Right. Or vice versa.
Or vice versa,
Yeah.
but it's one world.
Right.
In the case of landscape, you know, we've all got a mental picture of Versailles and
Yeah.
the sort of the geometry of the knots, designs, and so on. And it's instantly clear that corseted garden belongs with a corseted age, and an age with faith in right angles and straight lines, and perfect circles, and so on. And then you move on and you get us, what, Jane Austen, shall we say, and the landscape becomes Bo Peep.
You know, it seems to me in times of real chaos, like, for instance, in America, what we're going through at the moment, and the kind of madness that seems to sort of percolate up, the fundamentalism and the Tea Party stuff and all that.
Yes.
It seems to absolutely make the point that the play makes about the search for a story, a narrative, to explain everything, to make it tidy, to not deal with the fact that there may not be solutions, you know.
Yes.
You said once, since we cannot hope for order, let us withdraw with style from chaos. And it seems to me that's what the play is an exhibition of. It's a sort of, it's a meditation on that.
All right. I mean, yes, I can see that.
Is that still your position intellectually in the world?
It was not so much my position as a position with which I could sympathize if I imposed it on a character.
Yes, indeed.
Which is not quite the same thing as holding it, because my problem, if it is a problem, is that ever since I can remember, I've managed to annoyingly see both sides of an argument.
Made you very rich, Tom.
Well, it made me garrulous, that's for sure.
What surprises you about the play now when you see it?
The tension between feeling and thinking is very much at the center of the play.
Absolutely.
And I think the play teaches me that in the art of theatre, feeling has the imperative onus, the burden, the responsibility, and
the joy.
And the joy, one hopes, yes.